Remember that you are mortal. Remember that one day, just like all other people, you must die. This is a message I feel that I've danced around several times in writing and speaking. It's something I say to people a lot. It's something I say to myself even more. It's a terrifying thought, that one day, relatively soon, the end of my life will come. There's nothing I can do to prevent it. There's nothing I can do to avoid this process. Time, like a tidal wave rolling in from the ocean, will one day wash over me and my life. I see the end of life frequently. All too often am I attending at the bedside of the sick and dying, taking part as a background player in the most dramatic scene of their life. All too often am I witness to the regrets, the sadness, anger, resistance fights, wishes, prayers, bargaining, begging, and weeping. And I am not the only one to witness these things. Far be it from me to claim some special status over and above any other person who serves in the same capacity that I do. I am simply one person, playing a role that has been and one day will be filled by countless others. Someone has to do what I do. That's not the point I want to make. What I do feel compelled to say is something. I need to say something to you, dear listener, to tell you about the nature of life. I need to show you something you've likely avoided for far too long, something that you'll likely avoid until it's far too late to take any action at all. Remember that you are mortal. Remember that one day, just like all other people, you must die. If you're listening to this message, I want you to do something tonight. After the sun has set, after the last rays of its light have disappeared behind the horizon, I want you to go outside. Find a dark place, a place far away from the lights and the noise of the city if you can manage it. Find a clear patch in the sky, one where you can still see the stars shining through the inky blackness of the night sky. And if you can manage it, sit still. Sit still and look up. Look at the stars overhead and think about them. Turn away from the motion of the earth for just a second. Set aside the busyness of your life. Set aside the work you have to do tomorrow. Set aside the arguments, the negativity, the stress, the fears, all of it. And if you can manage, even set aside the good things. Set aside the joy, the love, the happiness, the good memories. Empty yourself of everything for just one moment and look up. Think about that little star. It's a tiny, infinitesimal, inconsequential point of light that shines through an almost unfathomable darkness that stretches over your head. If you looked away for just a moment and that star disappeared forever, you'd likely never notice it. In all likelihood, you've never even looked at that particular star before. How far away is it? How big is it? You don't really know, not without some effort and a number of careful measurements. How old is that star? Older than you or I, for certain. Older on a scale of time we cannot hope to comprehend. If you can manage it, put yourself there. Put yourself into the void of space surrounding that little point of light and turn your imaginary gaze back towards your home. Can you see it? Of course not. And then realize, dear listener, the awe-inspiring vastness of the universe around you. Realize that this little star is just a single point among countless points, infinitely far away. An entire universe surrounds you, shines down upon your head, and all of it is so far away you could scarcely hope to see it all in millions of lifetimes. It is so old you couldn't comprehend its age in any meaningful way. The things that happen in the void of space above you occur on a time scale so vast that the transformations won't be visible until the Earth itself is swallowed by the death of our own sun. And the things that do happen on timescales short enough to be appreciated by the human mind are so violent, so destructive, so incomprehensibly powerful, that any single one of them would annihilate you and our entire planet instantly, if we were close enough to travel toward them in the span of just a single lifetime. Take a moment, just a fraction of a minute, and consider this as you stare up into the universe around you. And when you've taken that time, just that fraction of a minute, I want you to return to yourself. Return to your space here on this tiny little blue rock and remember something important. Remember that you are mortal. Remember that one day, just like all other people, you must die. I've said it before, but it bears repeating. Life is precious, and it is short. It isn't long before you'll fall asleep for the last time, and if you're lucky, you'll be alert enough to know that the moment is fast approaching. What will happen to you in those final minutes? What will you be thinking about? Perhaps you, dear listener, are like me. Perhaps you spend your days thinking about the little things. You spend your time looking at your phone, watching television, playing video games, browsing social media, reading the news, listening to the voices of other people on podcasts and radio telling you what to think, what to believe, what to do. You do this as I do, to kill time. We kill time every day, in 1,000 different ways, all the while completely unconscious of the fact that time is all we have. So we spend our precious days, the most valuable gift of our precarious and terribly short lives, being controlled, being manipulated, dancing like puppets on a string held by some other person. We watch the news and hear the spoken propaganda of this party or that government, of this organization or that corporation, and we sink into it like a comfortable chair. We allow our minds to be molded by the power of the written word, by the turning of phrases, by the manipulation of images and video, each of them tuned carefully, precisely, in order to generate the most powerful emotional response you can muster. And the effect of this? Well, what do you think it is? What happens to the person who spends their days being controlled, constantly living in a state of heightened emotional arousal? What happens to the person who wakes up and immediately fills their morning with anger, outrage, with the venom of yet another furious speaker, yet another vitriolic and hateful protester, with videos of riots, burning, looting, violence, and rage? Do you think they might become tired? Do you think perhaps they might become numb? And perhaps, dear listener, just like I do, perhaps you turn toward things that will help you maintain that numbness. Perhaps you find things that reward you for engaging with them, like a video game, carefully designed to play on all the reward systems in your brain. Perhaps you turn toward social media, a place where you can display your outrage and emotions to the cheers of a virtual crowd. Perhaps, like me, dear listener, you find yourself in moments of unconsciousness, turning your outrage towards your family and reacting disproportionately to the minor slights inherent to a life spent in close quarters. And perhaps then, just like me, you find yourself once again reading the news, listening to podcasts, browsing Twitter and Facebook and YouTube and Instagram and all the rest to feed the demon of rage growing within your heart. And then the cycle begins all over again. In the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken, for dust you are, and to dust you shall return. Genesis 3:19, the words of God speaking to Adam and Eve. I reference the Bible a lot in these messages because I think the Bible has a lot of useful things to say. It is, after all, one of the foundational texts of Western society. And I think it is a text too often ignored by my contemporaries because of their disdain for religious texts. But the messages in its stories and morals cannot be ignored. One of those messages repeated so often throughout its texts is the constant reminder of human mortality. Dying, too, is one of our assignments in life. There as well, to do what needs doing. The words of Marcus Aurelius from Meditations, another one of those foundational texts I reference frequently. Human mortality is unavoidable. We all know it, deep within our souls in an inescapable way. We know it in the way a hand knows how to grasp an object. We know it in the way an eye knows how to see. And because we know this terrible fact in such a powerful and embodied way, we do our best to avoid it. It is painful to think about. It is terrifying. And yet, if we take the time to consider it honestly, to face it head-on without fear, it loses its power. See, that's the truth about all of the most terrifying things in life. We avoid pain, we avoid fear, we avoid discomfort and angst because they are inherently difficult to bear. Instead, we try to turn towards something else, something that distracts us from the anguish of the moment. We turn towards righteous anger, towards hedonic pleasure, towards distraction and numbness, towards anything that might sweeten the bitterness of the medicine we desperately don't want to swallow. And we do this because we're afraid. We're afraid like a small child is afraid of the darkness in her closet or under her bed. We fear the unknown. And so, like that small child, we turn away from it and let our minds fill it with all manner of terrible things, with the monsters of our own creation. And then, instead of facing that darkness head-on and realizing that it is full of nothing at all except the terrors invented by our own minds, we distract ourselves. We busy ourselves with meaningless tasks and useless hedonism. We try to numb our senses and dull our minds by surrendering to the flow of information, stimulation, and manipulation. Think about that star again. Think about it in its distant splendor, and realize the truth of your own existence. It is fragile, it is small, it is nearly insignificant to all things except those that are closest to you. I'm not saying that all of these things, these distractions, manipulations, and so forth, are controlled by some shadowy people hidden somewhere in a tower plotting evil things. I'm not arguing that we're being controlled in some conspiratorial way by some secret society or hidden things. That's a ridiculous idea. Here's the truth, dear listener, it's you. It's you and I together. It's all of us, the human race, each of us agreeing silently with the other that we won't address the elephant in the room. The distractions of the moment, whatever they may be, they're an emergent property of billions of frightened people all quietly agreeing that we won't face the most fundamental, the most important fact of our human existence. Remember that you are mortal. Remember that one day, just like all other people, you must die. So what do we do? Embrace it. Make peace with it. Understand the truth of life. The most fundamental truth of all life is that it ends. You can't control the simple fact that one day you will meet death. But you do have control over one thing. You can control how you meet death. From the time I have spent with the dying, I can tell you this. Those that die a good death are those who have found their peace with the end far before its inevitable arrival. Those who die a good death are those surrounded by family who remember them as present. They have lived good lives as fathers, mothers, husbands, wives, sisters, and brothers. They have given themselves wholeheartedly to the care of the people and the things closest to them because they knew the significance of those things. And to those people, surrounded by the love and care of a lifetime, wrapped in the peace of knowing that they mattered even for a short while, death is not a thing to fear. Whatever comes next is something to be embraced, something to be met face to face, without dread or regret. And those who die a bad death? They're the ones with regrets. They're the ones who remember there at the end every missed opportunity, every missed moment. They're the ones who have lived a life devoted to hedonism, to avoidance of responsibility, to the shutting out of life's hard truths. And now at the end they find themselves confronted with a fact they've tried so hard to ignore. They find themselves at the end of life realizing that they cannot have the pleasures of selfish distraction any longer. They realize they will soon be forgotten, and they die alone. Stop whatever you're doing for a moment and ask yourself, am I afraid of death because I won't be able to do this anymore? Marcus Aurelius, Meditations. At the end of your life, what will you remember? What will you be? I promise you, dear listener, if your mind remains intact to the end, you will remember far more than you think you will. There is a clarity of mind that seems to come from standing on the precipice of the abyss, staring into an eternal unknown. If you don't believe me, just take some time to talk to someone in that place. I'll tell you something true about these people. I've never heard a single one of them express a regret over spending time with the ones they love. I've never heard a regret expressed about raising children who live upright, righteous, and honest lives. Here are the regrets I've heard. I wish I hadn't taken my time with her for granted. I wish we had done more together. I wish my kids were here. I wish I'd been a better father. I wish I'd been a better mother. Remember that you are mortal. Remember that one day, just like every other person, you must die. So take a moment today and evaluate. Take stock of your life, of your time, your activities, hobbies, habits, vices, and your distractions. Think about carrying all of those things to your deathbed and ask yourself for each of those things, does it really matter? Seek an honest answer. And if the truth tells you that a thing doesn't matter, then I beg you, please, for your own sake, dear listener, discard it. Throw that thing away. Break that habit now. Release that grudge as though it were a glass of poison you were holding to your own lips, and restore that relationship if you can manage it. Live your life as though you know that one day you will die. Live your life as though you know that one day you'll be on that deathbed, and all that will be left around you is the remnants of a life spent however you saw fit. Remember every day that you are mortal, and in that remembrance be filled with the knowledge of what really matters in your life.